resurrection and I am life, says the Lord. Whoever has faith in me shall have life, even though he die. And everyone who has life and has committed himself to me in faith shall not die forever.
As for me, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. After my awakening, he will raise me up, and in my body I shall see God. I myself shall see, and my eyes behold him, who is my friend and not a stranger.
For none of us has life in himself, and none becomes his own master when he dies. For if we have life, we are alive in the Lord. And if we die in the Lord. So then, whether we live or die, we share the Lord's possession.
Happy from now on are those who die in the Lord. So it is, says the Spirit, for they rest from their labors.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God, who by the glorious resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ, destroyed death and brought life and immortality to light, grant that your servant Nick, being raised with him, may know the strength of his presence and rejoice in his eternal glory, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever.
Amen.
Amen. Most merciful God, whose wisdom is beyond our understanding, deal graciously with Nick's family and their grief. Surround them with your love, that they may not be overwhelmed by their loss, but have confidence in your goodness and strength to meet the days to come through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck what was planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to throw stones, a time to gather those stones, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. What gain have the workers from their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for his time. The word of the Lord.
Please stand for the reading of the gospel. The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. You may be seated. I've known Nick so long that he actually met my mother before I did. She even spanked him before she spanked me, because she delivered him. He played my mother in a play with a curly wig. He did surgery on Johnny Phillips, removing most of his intestines that look suspiciously like a string of sausages. How do you say goodbye to someone that you've known that long, shared that much, and depended on that much? Well, you don't. You just say so long. I'll see you later, and until we meet again. Nick blessed us all for many years with his wit, his helping hand, and his love. And that is why I chose Beatitudes this morning from Matthew, to show that we are all truly blessed by God. We are all sought after and blessed by God when we are poor in spirit, not knowing where to turn. We are sought after and blessed by God when we mourn and see no end to our sorrow. God is right here in this room now blessing us with memories of good times, good humor, of hunting trips and vacations, and being waited on by Nick, who would ask, "And what would you ladies like to eat?" A table full of gentlemen. God certainly blessed Nick with never-ending humor in every situation. Aggie Britt reminded us of some of the Nickisms in a heartfelt note on Facebook. Life is better with laughter. Life is too short. Smile while you still have your teeth. When nothing is going right, take a left. And don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out alive. We all have Nickisms that we hold dear to our hearts, but some of them you can't say in public, especially during a church service. Nick's other gift was putting everyone at ease. You could be 8 or 80, or a shy teenager. Nick wouldn't let up until he got a giggle, or at least a smile. Nick was blessed with the seasons of life. He had seasons to share, seasons to serve, seasons to hunt, and seasons to work. Even to the end, Nick wanted to finish projects he had started to make sure they were done right. He finished sheetrocking at St. Teresa's even though he should not have been scampering around on scaffolding. He told Donna, "If I don't do it, it won't be done right." And he was probably right. There is not a seam to be found in his work. How do we thank a man that brought this kind of character into our lives? And Nick would say to pass it on. So let's all take a page or two and a joke or two from Nick's life and pass it on. God bless Nick in so many ways. Mostly, though, I think he would agree that his blessing has been his family. Parents who faithfully supported him, going to the bars so he could play music. Brothers and sisters that he has had the good fortune to remain close to throughout all their lives. The blessing of Donna, a strong woman to see him through the good times and the hard times. I did not say bad times because for Nick, nothing was really bad, just some of them were more difficult than others. Nick is blessed with children who love and honor him every day, and nieces and nephews, cousins. To say he had never met a stranger is so very true. Take Nick's blessings and pass them on, and the world will be a brighter place. How many times have I said blessings since I stood here? We're here to celebrate a life well lived, and a man who was loving and loved, and memories that make us smile, even when we can't remember the punchline. God's blessings shine now as we celebrate Nick's life and his many, many gifts. Amen.
Well, my name is Bill Black. My daughter said, don't be long-winded up here. But Tracy asked me to play a tune on my harmonica, and then she said, can you say a few words? It's kind of hard to just say a few words, but remembering Nick Monroe. Nick and I became fast friends almost to the day I first really met him in '81 when I moved to Nenana from Fort Yukon. He was so darn friendly and funny, and always remained so as far as I was concerned. The Monroe was just being built at the time, and shortly thereafter, when it was ready, I, like many others, began to go there on a regular basis. And as you all know, it was a very welcoming place and a great alternative to the other two places downtown, and became especially attractive when they began serving their legendary, still to this day, hamburgers and other food items. The bonus would be if Nick happened to be there with a warm greeting and then some teasing, tending bar, helping with the food, and enlivening the place. I knew Nick to be a great musician, having heard him with the Nenana Unlimited several times at dances. He was a great singer. I always loved how he sang the Beatles classic, And I Love Her, and several other Beatles tunes. I love them all. And he and his brother Ted served up those great harmonies to Mary's incredible vocals. We've been missing Ted's vocals for a while now, and now we'll be missing Nick's. In the ensuing years, I had the opportunity to play with Nick in other band configurations, besides sitting in with the Nenana Unlimited, and he was so much fun to play music with, always. He is a great rhythm guitarist and could play those signature solos note perfect every time. You could always tell Nick was enjoying the music and the good times that went with it, and yet he was always so professional. By the way, I made sure to contact our mutual friend Ron Riff Raffson, who's a highly respected longtime Fairbanks bass player, and about this Memorial today, and he called me from Arizona expressing his regrets for not being unable to attend, but extending his sympathies and love for the family and all of us, as he was a huge admirer of Nick, the musician, with whom he played with numerous times, and even more the great person Nick was. We actually reminisced a long time over the phone yesterday, sharing our admiration for Nick. Aside from the music in the Monroe, Nick was, as you know, an accomplished builder and craftsman, always in more demand than he could meet with his business responsibilities, though he would try, and was especially known as the go-to guy for drywall, in demand for mudding and taping long after he had forgotten his willingness to hang rock. It sounds like he was still hanging rock. It's a young man's game, though he would do it in a pinch. He did a masterful job on my basement in my Fairbanks house after I moved there, fitting me in around numerous other jobs, and did work for several friends of mine after I suggested that they contact him if they wanted a quality job, and they weren't disappointed, of course. Plus, they got the bonus of getting to know him and experience his good nature and killer sense of humor, one that may be said to be his trademark, despite his so many other great talents and qualities. In my role as a teacher in the Nenana Public School for 29 years and more, I taught both Logan and Kynan, Nick's sons, and I can tell you that Nick was a great father, helping Donna raise two great, smart, and respectful boys. They weren't, of course, without mischief and misconduct. After all, they were Nick's kids. And both of them, as you know, have his incredible smile, good looks, good nature, and quick and deadly sense of humor. But he was so proud of them, and I know they were equally proud to have him for a father, and of course Donna for their mom. When Nick was seemingly in a recovery from his first serious round of this battle that ultimately claimed him, I had to run into Logan in town and asked him how his dad was doing. He said, to the effect, "Oh, you know my dad, he's back at it, busy and going as hard as ever." You could see the pride and hear it in Logan's expression and voice. When I'd see Nicole at the softball fields in Fairbanks, she was telling me much the same during that interlude. I'm pretty certain, too, that Charlie and Ronica would be quick to tell you that Nick Monroe was a great stepfather to them as well. I could go on much longer talking about Nick Monroe. I could share stories about our shenanigans together in Fairbanks or Anderson or Nenana, about running into him up on the Teclanica, moose hunting with his brothers. I could try to recall one or two of the hundreds of hilarious jokes he could tell like no one else. Always having a new one or two every time you saw him. Of his antics behind the bar with his brother Edgar cracking everyone up. But I'll leave that to others here. But I'll never stop thinking about all of that and smiling to myself over the great memories I have of Nick and being around him. I loved him as a brother, great friend, fellow musician and peer, and I'm going to miss him hugely, like all of you here. Sing along if you like.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marie Monroe, and Nick was first my brother-in-law for 20 years, and then he was just my brother for the rest of the time. It is what it is. In the past few months, Nick adopted this mantra, or maybe he always used it, and I just heard him say it more often lately. When Donna asked me to write this eulogy, I pondered this phrase, "It is what it is," and wondered about its meaning for Nick and for each of us. For me, it began to call to mind the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Serenity, courage, and wisdom. Nick embodied all of these strengths and demonstrated them throughout his life, particularly during the last 14 months that he lived with cancer. These strengths fortified him every day and helped to guide those around him. Serenity means staying cool, calm, and collected. He did. Courage is demonstrating bravery and resolve and daring to take risks. He was definitely courageous. Wisdom is good judgment, understanding, and ultimately a resolve deep in your soul to accept things as they are. He was very wise. Nick died the way he lived, with courage, kindness, humor, and acceptance of things beyond his control. He underwent a long, difficult series of treatments, chemo, immunotherapy, radiation, and he fought courageously because, of course, he wanted to survive and be here for his loved ones. A few weeks ago, he said to me, "I never thought that at this time in my life, I'd be making things so hard on my family." I reminded him that it wasn't his choice to be experiencing this. He nodded slowly as we sat side by side in the warm Hawaiian sun, a knowing nod that said, "You're right, it is what it is. Some things just are." Life, as we all know, is a series of ups and downs, joys and sorrows, gains and losses. Nick had his share of it all. And when we look at it that way, we see that cancer had just a very small bit part in the story of his life. His life was about so much more. His life was about family, friends, community, service, work, play, adventure, travel, and of course, music. He was a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, an uncle, and a very good and loyal friend. He was a performer, an athlete, a sailor, a businessman, a hunter, a carpenter, a true jack of all trades, and surely a self-made man. He excelled and was successful at so many things, and I believe that most of us would say he had a lot more ups and downs, a lot more joy than sorrow, and a lot more gains than losses. Family was important to Nick. He came from a large extended family, and he did his part in making it even larger. His 3 daughters and 2 sons, his granddaughters and great-granddaughter, are his true legacy and gifts to us all. Each of them carries forward his attributes and strengths in their own way. Ronica is a savvy business owner who uses her resources whenever she can to help others, just like Nick. Charlie loves to be in the great outdoors and knows how to have fun in life, just like Nick. Nicole is kind, caring, and devoted to family, just like Nick. Logan can make the guitar sing, just like Nick. And kind and smile lights up a room whenever he walks in, just like Nick. An ancient Chinese philosopher had this to say about love. Being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. Donna and Nick loved each other deeply and drew strength and courage from their relationship. Over the past year, they faced tremendous challenges together. It drew them closer and made them stronger. Through it all, they never faltered in their commitment to one another. Nick and Donna were together for nearly 3 decades. Their decision not to marry was a conscious decision, said Donna. Instead, they embraced a philosophy and a way of life together characterized by the words, "I love you today." It was our thing, Donna said. Every day we made a commitment to be together for that day. Donna went on to say, "We had a really good life together. He made me laugh even when I was super sad or feeling low. He always knew just what I needed and what to do or say to make me feel better." I'd like to take a moment on behalf of the entire family to acknowledge Donna for all she did for Nick over the past year, particularly during the last month. She exhibited a patience and compassion and a level of caring that was truly beautiful to witness. I had the privilege of spending quite a lot of time at ANMC during Nick's final week. There were many of us assembled, and we'd take turns at his bedside. During my turns, I began to observe that even though Nick was sleeping most of the time, his facial expression would relax when Donna was in the room, and he would often open his eyes when she spoke and scan the room until he found her face. She was his rock, his steady anchor in the storm. It was clear that Nick, from the very bottom of his heart and the depth of his soul, valued the love and care that Donna extended anew each day. Her presence, her actions, and her words said, "I love you today," over and over, every day. We should all be so blessed. Thank you, Donna. Friends. Nick made friends easily. He had charisma and charm and a personality that drew people to him. For many, the first friends we have in life are our siblings. Nick's first best friend was his older brother, Ted. The two were close in age and spent their early years roaming free around the small town of Nenana, riding bikes, climbing trees, throwing rocks, building makeshift rafts to take off in the swamps and bogs around town, and I'm sure getting into their fair share of mischief. Nenana, as many of you know, was a much different place back then, much smaller, much safer, and I can only imagine all the fun those two had growing up together. When both of their older brothers were gone, both Charles and Ted, Nick became the oldest brother to Billy and Edgar. And the three of them remained very close, always, moose hunting together every fall, assisting each other with projects, and generally just being there for each other, brothers and friends. In high school, Nick was one of the really cool kids, a star on the basketball team, an aspiring musician, a good student, an all-around talented guy. Others, including me, looked up to him and admired him greatly. Everyone wanted to be Nick's friend, and he made and kept a lot of close friends over the years. I asked one of his closest lifelong friends, Ted Suckling, to tell me about their friendship. Ted himself wasn't born in Nenana. He was born in Nenana, but moved to Nenana in 1956, and he and Nick started first grade together. On one of the first days of school, 6-year-old Nick, or Nicky as he was called back then, was entertaining his classmates, imagine that, with a story about Fifi eating a mouse in the bathtub the night before. Ted remembers being shocked by the story because he thought Fifi must be Nick's sister. His young imagination went wild, and he decided then and there that he'd never go to Nick's house. He later learned that Fifi was the family cat, and once that was cleared up, Ted happily spent endless hours at Nick's house. Ted and Nick's friendship continued all through school, and they graduated together from Nenana High in 1967. In April of 1969, Ted joined the Air Force, and in September of that year, Nick enlisted in the Navy. Over the next 4 years, the two friends kept in touch by writing letters. When their military service was complete, both of them moved back to Nenana. Ted went to work heading up the log home building operation for Wilderness Builders, a Tocatili Corporation company. And Nick worked summers on the Nenana docks for Utana until, in Ted's words, he stole Nick away from Utana to work with him at Wilderness Builders. When I asked Ted how he and Nick managed to stay so close over a span of 63 years, he told me that for the past 20 years at least, they talked every night on the phone. Ted would call Nick around 10:30 in the evening, and they would shoot the breeze, Ted said. Sometimes it was just a quick check-in, and other times a long conversation, depending on what they had going on. Ted said this: "We sure had a lot of laughs. He was my best friend forever." Donna asked me to share a conversation that she had with Nick in which he talked about his friends. He told Donna that he was sad that he wasn't going to be around for his friends to call when they needed help. And near the end of his life, after seeing the constant stream of friends and family who came to be at his side in the hospital in Anchorage, Nick said this: "It looks like I brought a whole lot of people together. Now I hope they stay together, even without me." We all need friends in our lives, and Nick definitely set the example of how to have and to be a good friend. Thank you, Nick. And special thanks to Ted Suckling for being the person You are, Ted, and for loving Nick for so long and so well. You were a true best friend. His military service is another part of Nick's life. He served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War aboard the USS Enterprise. The Enterprise was the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Nick worked in communications and saw the world as a young sailor, making stops in Japan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines, to mention a few. It's difficult to imagine all Nick must have gone through in adjusting from small-town rural Alaska to the expansive worldview that he acquired during his military career. And as you would expect from Nick, he made deep and lasting friendships during his time in the service and maintained those connections for the remainder of his life. One of his Navy buddies called Nick a couple of weeks ago to check in. It raised Nick's spirits to hear Tom's voice. It's become customary of late to thank those who have served and those still serving in the military. This thank you feels long overdue, particularly for those who served during the Vietnam era. Thank you for your service, Nick. Work and the Mondo. Nick and Carol built and opened the Monroe in 1982, nearly 4 decades ago. Over the years, the Mondo and Nick Monroe became synonymous in the minds of many Alaskans. People who stopped in the first time for the best burger in Alaska returned time and again, as much to see and visit with Nick as they did for the food. After the fundraiser that was held shortly after Nick's cancer diagnosis, Nick told me he received dozens of cards and letters in the mail. Many said something like this: "You probably won't remember me, but I stop in the Mondo occasionally. I like your food, and I like you. Here's a check. Please get well." Nick was overwhelmed by the outpouring of good wishes and money that he received from people he didn't really know. Again, never underestimate the power of a smile and a friendly visit, and a good joke or card trick doesn't hurt either. Nick liked to work. He was a hard worker and always willing to lend a hand whenever and wherever he could in the community. Many of us in this room are the beneficiaries, as Bill Black said, of his sheetrocking and carpentry expertise, his ability to fix broken pipes and just about any broken thing, really. Nick's good friend, Ted Suckling again, told me that he was the most helpful guy he ever knew. Ted went on to say he was a really busy guy, always busy, running the Mondo, taking odd jobs, and helping his friends. He was industrious. He was a hard worker. When there was a need but not much money, Nick stepped up and did the job anyway, for just the cost of materials, and sometimes he'd even provide the materials. He'd willingly plow your driveway, hang a door, or install a window or a toilet, and have a funny story or joke to share while he worked. He knew how to make work fun. And I, for one, never heard him complain about anything. Yesterday, after the Mass that was held in his honor at St. Teresa's, Mark Krinsky pointed out the sheetrock and finish work that Nick did just a few months ago to complete the remodel of the sanctuary area, the tower area of the church. He told me the story of how he was a bit reluctant to call Nick because he knew he was in the midst of chemo treatments. But of course, when he did, Nick didn't hesitate to say he'd do the job, and he did it beautifully. Nick's example says this: work hard and work smart. Lighten someone else's load when you can, and have fun. Don't sweat the small stuff. Thank you, Nick. Play. Nick truly loved to make people laugh and smile with his jokes and antics. All kids loved him, especially his grandchildren, his nieces and nephews, and great-nieces and nephews, because he managed to keep a childlike wonder and spirit throughout his life and in his heart. He remembered, as children do, that life should be fun and funny. We should laugh a lot. We should. And Nick knew how to play. It might be a game of pool or darts or basketball, time spent strumming a guitar and making music with friends, swapping tall tales while sitting around the campfire on the banks of the Teklenika, or engaging in a tiny hands competition with a son-in-law. The possibilities were endless. We just need to play, we do. We need to get outside in nature, travel, see new places, have adventures. We need laughter and joy and fun in our lives, and Nick showed us how to do that with gusto. Thank you, Nick. Music. I can't end without talking about the importance of music in Nick's life. As we mentioned in Nick's obituary, he started playing the guitar at a very young age. He and his brothers, Charles and Ted, formed a band when they were just all young teenagers. Nick on the lead and rhythm, Charles on bass, and Ted on the drums. They played endlessly in the upstairs of their family home, and I often wondered if they were the reason their dad, Bill Monroe Sr., was deaf at a fairly young age, and their mother, Emily, escaped the house to go ice fishing whenever she could. The Monroe brothers played music at Nenana's Corner Bar and Moocher's for many, many years before they were actually old enough to be patrons of those establishments. As with so many things in his life, Nick was primarily self-taught on the guitar, and I think we'd all agree that he developed and grew to be a very fine musician. The brothers' band eventually became the Nenana Unlimited Band that we know and love today, with Mary and Wes Alexander, Jeremy Gustafson, and Wes Alexander Jr. When Nenana Unlimited is playing, it's impossible to stay in your seat. You just have to get up and dance. And all of the important life events for so many of us, wedding receptions, graduations, and anniversaries, have been celebrated to the magical music of Nenana Unlimited. It's like the soundtrack of our lives. What a powerful legacy and meaningful contribution to our collective memories. Thank you, Nick. In conclusion, I've decided that the phrase, "it is what it is," really means it is what you make of it. Yes, there are things in life that just are and can't be changed. But how we deal with those things, how we respond to them, what we say and what we do in those significant moments is at the heart of it all who we are as human beings and the outward manifestation of how we've chosen to live our lives. Our choices can make us hard and cold and ultimately lonely, or they can develop us into the kind of person Nick Monroe was. Kind, loving, fun-loving, and ready to embrace whatever comes our way with a positive attitude and amazing grace. The song lyrics that remind me of Nick, as I ponder and wonder, as I grieve and endeavor to grow and be stronger through this time of loss, are these. You've got to dance like there's nobody watching. You got to love like you'll never get hurt. You got to sing like there's nobody listening, and live your life like it's heaven on earth. We know it's possible to do all of that because we watched Nick do it. Thank you, Nick.